Joining us now, member of the Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committees, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Also with us, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, Ian Brzezinski. Good to have you both on this morning.
Really? So before we get to our two guests, some more foreign policy breaking news. North Korea has now come out and said it will not denuclearize.
Oh, wow.
Unless the United States removes its troops and the nuclear umbrella from South Korea and Japan.
Who could have ever seen this coming, first of all? Secondly, isn't it amazing how weakness, just being so weak and pathetic, and just cowering, under the side of Vladimir Putin. Isn't it amazing how that encourages other tyrants across the globe?
Yeah. So
to do things just like that.
Kim Jong-un's sitting there. He's watching what's happening, maybe yesterday and before that, and he's saying, you know what? New demands for you, Donald Trump. Get all your troops out of South Korea and Japan, or there's no deal.
Could you ever imagine he would seem so weak and impotent as a president? The very guy that ran on strength, to the point now he's getting kicked by the other school.
Actually, this is what's so devastating. Let's go to Senator Coons. This is what's so devastating politically for Donald Trump. This is a guy that ran on strength, and now we've seen Donald Trump cower at the side of Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, and now we see him cowering once again and turning the Middle East, turning Syria over to Russia. And he actually, in a tweet this morning, called Russia a local power there. By the way, just for our friends watching at home, until Donald Trump, Russia had been locked out of the Middle East since 1973.
Senator
Well, Joe, that's right. I couldn't disagree more with this decision. It's a terrible decision, both in how the president made it and in what he's decided to do. I only pray that our president will reconsider, because he managed to unite all of us in the Senate in the last 2 days. First, we had a very positive day where we all came together and passed a big, bold, bipartisan criminal justice reform bill and managed to avoid a government shutdown. So the mood was pretty positive yesterday. And then, just like a shot of electricity, the message that the president, in a tweet, announced he was going to withdraw from Syria and hand a great big Christmas gift to the Ayatollah Khamenei, to Vladimir Putin, and to Bashar al-Assad of Syria, I think unified our Senate in concern, even outrage. You've played earlier in this segment the statements from a wide range of senators. I'll add my voice to them. I pray our president reverses this terrible decision that simply cedes the ground of Syria to ISIS, to Iran, and to Russia. Just an awful decision.
Ian Brzezinski, you and those associated with the Atlantic Council were very concerned leading into this week about what had been going on in Ukraine. Concerned that Putin may actually show aggression towards Ukraine in the coming weeks or months. We've seen how Donald Trump's weakness has encouraged a tyrannical leader in North Korea to issue a new statement, new demands. How will this weakness impact Vladimir Putin, who's already praising it? Does it give him a green light to go into Ukraine?
Well, Joe, Putin feeds on weakness and disarray. And, you know, he's a prudent guy. He's a rational actor. He plans, he prepares his forces, and he waits for the opportunity. And if you look at the situation around Ukraine today, you see the following. You see a sustained buildup of Russian forces along Ukraine's eastern frontier. For 2 years, Russia has been building bases, roads, and deploying large amounts of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and forces. And just recently, he's moved more tanks and more aircraft into that area, air assault troops into that area, and also into Crimea. Second, from Putin's vantage point, he probably sees a West that's in political disarray and paralysis. He looks at Germany going through a difficult transition. He sees the protests in Paris. He sees the UK frozen by Brexit. And then he looks across the Atlantic and he sees a president who's facing increasing political challenges at home. So that's the West as distracted and paralyzed. And then you look at the West's response to the Kerch crisis when the Russians seized those 3 Ukrainian ships. There has been no response to that at all. The EU had a big summit. They did nothing. Trump has sent mixed signals on Russia. Yesterday, he increased sanctions and decreased sanctions. That's confusion, not a clear message. And winter is a bad time for Ukraine. It's least capable at that time to defend its territory.
Senator Coons, let me ask you how this decision was made by the President of the United States. We don't really know. The only person we've seen come out in support of it has been Senator Rand Paul, one of your Republican colleagues there in the Senate. But otherwise, it's been almost consensus that this is a bad decision, including from the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis. The general was against this policy. The president's own special envoy to Syria just 8 days ago said it would be reckless to leave Syria. And now here we are, the president announcing. Do you have any sense from talking to people around Washington and on Capitol Hill how the president arrived at this decision?
I don't. My strong impression from other senators I spoke with last night was that none of the relevant senior senators had been consulted or informed before this decision was announced. I think it was announced on Twitter.
Yes.
It's possible, because I haven't spoken to every senator, that there were some that he consulted with. But the idea that it is Senator Rand Paul and Senator Mike Lee who are chairing this, and frankly more than 90 other senators who I expect will denounce it, question its wisdom, question the process, and say this was a grave mistake, tells you something about the ways in which President Trump, who ran as an unconventional candidate, our only president with no military or elected experience before getting into office, has made a decision here that is almost uniformly condemned in the Senate of the United States. That is not a good move, and it shows a lack of consultation. I'm really, frankly, more concerned if he made this decision in direct opposition to advice from the senior levels of our armed forces and our intelligence community, who I strongly suspect advised him urgently against making this brazen and ill-considered move.
David Ignatius?
So I want to ask a question of Ian Brzezinski. Ian, listening to your careful diction and precise language, I can't help but think of your dad.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Your dad was wary of using military force, but when he felt it was necessary, he tried to do it with that similar precision. I'm just wondering what sort of advice you think he would offer based on your study of his career, his instincts about politics. What would he be saying now?
You know, I look back to the Carter administration when they deterred a Soviet invasion of Poland in 1980. And that's an interesting analogy because Poland was not a member of NATO. It was actually an occupied territory of the Warsaw Pact. And the Russians mobilized divisions of East German forces, I guess you would then say Soviet or Russian forces, and deployed them right on the side of Poland's frontiers. And the administration undertook a very comprehensive strategy to deter that invasion. They warned on solidarity. They leveraged Pope John Paul II's voice to communicate to the Polish people, to warn them. They clearly articulated readiness to impose very serious economic sanctions on the Russians. And I have to assume, in light of those Soviet mobilizations, NATO forces were probably put on a higher level of alert. And that significantly contributed, if not drove, the Soviet decision not to invade Poland at that time. So it's possible to deter aggression against a non-allied state like Ukraine today. I think that's how my father would have approached it.
So, Senator Coons, what's next? What does the United States Senate do today with at least 90% of the Senate opposed to the ceding of Syria completely to the Iranians, to the Russians, and to ISIS?
Well, Joe, I think you'll hear today very strong, very unified messages to the president, begging him to reconsider this decision before he heads off to his 2-week golf vacation at Mar-a-Lago. He put out a video, as you referenced earlier, citing those who have fought and sacrificed and died in the conflict against ISIS. And my hunch is that you will hear voices from our armed forces, from the Congress, and from the general public saying that the war against ISIS is not won, and that we should best honor the sacrifice and service of our men men and women at arms by not ceding this ground, by not paving a highway to control of Syria for Iran and bringing this threat right to the threshold of our vital ally, Israel. We have the world's most powerful military for a reason, and the fight against ISIS was an important and noble and significant effort where we pulled in dozens of other countries. The United States did manage to bring some measure of stability to a part of a country that was destroyed by ISIS. But that fight is not over and not won. And for us to just unilaterally withdraw and abandon the Kurds to an almost certain advance by either the Turks or the Iranians or both, I think is just it. Why would anyone stand alongside us and fight in such an important conflict as our work against ISIS in the future if this is how we treat our partners, the Kurds, in this important fight against ISIS? So you'll see a lot of effort today to try and persuade the president to reverse this decision.
Well, of course, the answer is they wouldn't because of this. And I fear many people, Senator, that saw that video in the military thought it grotesque that the president summoned up the memories of those men and women who sacrificed their all for this country to fight against ISIS, to fight against Russia, to fight against Iran, and then claim that turning that country over to Vladimir Putin and ISIS and Assad is the last thing their loved ones would want.
Senator Coons, thank you very much. And Ian, thank you as well.
Thank you all.
Good to have you both on this morning. And coming up, it's not only troubling signs for U.S. foreign policy, there are also indications that the U.S. economy may be in deeper trouble than first thought. Steve Ratner will explain why next.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.